The Mansion in the Mist by John Bellairs, Chapter 13. The next afternoon, everyone in Hoosac was reading about Mrs. Hanson Oxenstern's encounter with a ghost in her own living room. It was quite a tale, and Mrs. Oxenstern had told it herself to a reporter from the Hoosac News, who showed up at her house in response to a frantic phone call. Miss Eels got the newspaper delivered to the library around 4 in the afternoon. She sat in her office reading the article aloud to Anthony. And so Mrs. Oxenstern believes that she has seen a genuine apparition, the spirit of Mr. Ambrose, the long-dead owner of the gloomy mansion in New Stockholm, Wisconsin. A psychic from Minneapolis has volunteered to cleanse Mrs. Oxenstern's house of evil presences, but she is not interested in such things. She will sell the desk and a mirror that was also the property of Mr. Ambrose, and that, she feels, will be all that is necessary to give her peace of mind again. Miss Eels put the paper down and looked up. Normally a story like this would have amused her, but she wasn't laughing now. She knew that Mr. Ambrose was not dead. Instead, he had vanished into another dimension, and he had become the evil creature known as the Grand Autarch. But if he wasn't dead, why had his ghostly form been seen hovering near the desk he used to own? "I wonder what Emerson will have to say about all this," said Miss Eels as she stared absently at her cluttered desktop. "He's supposed to be such a big expert on the occult, so I suppose he will have some half-baked explanation of what happened." She looked questioningly at Anthony. "Do you think I should call him and tell him?" Anthony blinked in astonishment. Why wouldn't you want to tell him?" he asked. Miss Eels frowned and bit her lip. "Because he'll want to buy the desk, that's why," she said vehemently. "When I called him last night and told him my news, he immediately started making plans to break into Mrs. O's house and swipe the desk. Can you imagine? He really wants to go back to that other world and find the cube before the Autarchs do." Miss Eels folded her arms and threw herself back in her chair. The chair hit a small potted plant that was perched on a shelf nearby. It fell to the floor and smashed. Of course, Anthony ran to get a broom and dustpan, and soon the mess was cleaned up. But as he was putting the clay fragments and the dirt into a wastebasket, Anthony turned suddenly. "Miss Eels, what if he's right?" he said in a trembling voice. "What if those awful people really can invade our world and change it? Maybe we ought to pay attention to what Emerson says and help him before it's too late." Miss Eels rolled her eyes upward and sank back disgustedly into her swivel chair. "Heavens, Anthony!" she exclaimed. "I've lived with Emerson all my life and do know him a lot better than you do. His mind churns out weird theories the way a meat grinder grinds out meat. It's true that by accident you found a way to that frightening moonlit world, but there's no evidence that the coin with the word Wabe scratched on it is a clue of any sort. Maybe the person who hid the coin is named Wabe, Thaddeus Q. Wabe, the well-known vandal who ruins the value of rare coins. In any case, I think that the way back to Miserable Acres is closed forever, and Mr. Ambrose's desk isn't going to fly us back there. Emerson's theory is just a lot of hooey." Anthony looked at Miss Eels challengingly. "Well, if it's a lot of hooey," he asked, "then why don't you tell him about the desk?" Immediately Anthony regretted what he had said. He hardly ever spoke sharply to Miss Eels, but he really believed in Emerson's ideas. At first, Miss Eels was surprised by what Anthony had said, but then she laughed. "Em has always told me that I don't have a logical mind," she said, still chuckling. "And this certainly proves it. All right, I'm not being reasonable or sensible. I guess in the back of my mind I have this awful fear that my brother might be right about the magic powers of that old desk. If it can whisk him back to the Misty Mansion, then he may land in a heap of trouble. And what's worse, we'll probably go with him. And we'll be in danger too." She paused and scratched her ear thoughtfully. "Oh, well," she sighed at last as she glanced at the phone on her desk. "He's my dear brother, and I've never hidden anything important from him in my life. Maybe when he hears what happened to Mrs. Oxenstern, he won't want the desk after all. Who knows?" And with that, she picked up the receiver, dialed O, and asked the operator for long distance. Needless to say, Emerson got very excited when he heard about what happened. But he was not at all afraid of the ghostly shape that had frightened the wits out of Mrs. Oxenstern. It was, he explained patiently, merely an astral body, a thing projected by the evil brain of Mr. Ambrose, alias the Grand Autarch. "My amulets will protect us as they did before," said Emerson calmly. "You really shouldn't worry, sis. You'll be in good hands if you decide to come back to the mansion with me. I'll be going, and I imagine that Anthony will want to come too. We'll find that cube and smash it or bring it back with us." "It's as easy as that, eh?" said Miss Eels. "Em, you are a brilliant man, but you tend to be overconfident. As I've told you at least 8,000 times in the past, if you can use that dratted desk to go back to that other world, there'll be a lot of even if you can use that dratted desk to go back to that other world, there'll be a lot of danger. Do you understand that?" "Of course I do," said Emerson. "Now, didn't you say that Mrs. Oxenstern was getting rid of a mirror that she got at Ambrose's house? Do you know anything about that?" "Of course not," Miss Eels shot back. "Why do you want to know about this mirror?" "Because it may be important," grumbled Emerson. "Look, I'll be down to see you tomorrow morning, and when I go over to buy that desk, I'm going to say that my name is Emerson Dittersdorf. If I mention the name Eels, she'll probably throw me out on my ear." "Probably," said Miss Eels, and with that she hung up. The next morning, true to his word, Emerson showed up at Miss Eels' house. As usual, he was driving his 1938 LaSalle, but this time a green wooden trailer was hitched up to the rear bumper. Emerson was wearing a very snazzy blue pinstripe suit he had bought in London, and a trench coat with lots of pockets and flaps. After having breakfast with his sister, he drove over to Mrs. Oxenstern's house and rang her bell. He told Mrs. Oxenstern that he was an antique collector from St. Cloud and he wanted to buy her rare Frank Furnace desk. Needless to say, Mrs. Oxenstern was only too happy to get the desk off her hands, and she said she would throw in an antique mirror for free. Emerson paid cash for the desk, then he lugged it out to the trailer and laid it carefully on its side. The mirror was wrapped up in brown paper and tied with twine. Emerson put it on the floor of the trailer next to the desk. Then he threw a tarpaulin over everything and lashed it securely to the sides of the trailer. After a final thank you to Mrs. Oxenstern, Emerson drove to Miss Eels' house on Pine Street. When he entered the living room, he could see that she was pretty nervous. "Emerson, you're not bringing that haunted desk into my house," she said. "I wouldn't be able to sleep a wink if—" "Myra!" snapped Emerson, cutting her off. "I'm just going to have a cup of tea, then I'll drive straight back to St. Cloud with my loot, and then—" "Oh, don't tell me, exclaimed Miss Eels, waving her hands in front of her face, as if to fend off her brother. "When you get home, you're going to put on that Gobi Desert Sand amulet and wear it all the time, and that will probably protect you from the ghosties, am I right?" "You're way ahead of me," said Emerson. "Yes, that is exactly what I am going to do, and when I think the time is right, I'm going to go back to find that sundial and dig near it." He paused and stared hard at Miss Eels. "And I could use some help," he added solemnly. "I really could." "I'll think about it," she said quietly. Then she smiled. "Come on, brother," she said as she led the way to the kitchen. "We have lapsing souchong tea and English muffins with strawberries and whipped cream and honey. A second breakfast before you start your long drive back to St. Cloud. Sound good?" Emerson nodded and rubbed his hands cheerfully. Like his sister, he loved to eat. And that is the end of chapter 13.